All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Father Brad Sjoquist. Brad, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, so you and I, we grew up right around the same time in Kingsford. When you think back on your time growing up here, what are some kind of big memories that stand out to you?
Yeah, growing up in Kingsford, I grew up in the Ford Edition, so not far from Kingsford High School. So, I used to play in the park that's kind of there. We used to call it the tire park because they had like these giant tires that you crawled through that eventually got taken down when I was, I don't know, probably in elementary school sometime. But
Yeah,
uh, but yeah, just kind of had a pretty normal childhood. Walked
sure.
to Kingsford Middle School, when I
Yeah,
went there, and walked to high school um, until I could drive, and then I drove, even though it
yeah,
was
yeah.
just 2 minutes away.
The famous Ford edition, a lot of history there with the old Ford plant and being workers' houses, and there's a lot of kind of neat history in that part of town. So it's definitely very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom loves remodeling our house, so at one point we found that all the floorboards were stamped Ford Motor Company
Oh
because
man, that's so cool.
the houses there were built for
Yep.
Ford auto workers. So.
Yep. Yeah. I'm a huge history buff, so that type of stuff totally interests me.
Mhm.
But so besides, being from the same town, you also ended up going to the same university as me. You ended up heading to Central Michigan University. What was it that kind of led you down to CMU? Were you like just looking to get out of the UP, or I guess what brought you there?
Yeah, I think I wanted to get a little farther from home,
Sure.
not to necessarily just get out of the UP, but
Yeah.
just to kind of spread my wings a little bit. I ended up going to Central mainly because I got a good scholarship to go there.
Oh, perfect.
That was kind of the the main determining factor for that. And I think for me, Central it was a good choice. It was like the perfect size. There are all these people from Southeast Michigan and Metro Detroit that were like, "There's nothing to do in Mount Pleasant. This is such a small town." And I got there and I was like, "There's so much to do here."
Right. That's how I felt too. I'm like, it's got a big school feel, but you can like get from one side of campus to the other in like 10 minutes. Like,
Yeah,
so I felt the exact same way.
yeah, absolutely.
I know when you were there, you ended up studying philosophy. I mean, was that the plan all along, or did you just kind of find that over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I double majored in Spanish and psychology, but
Okay.
minored in philosophy.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
so that was kind of, I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. So I'd been thinking a little bit about seminary. I was thinking about law school. I kind of just started taking classes, and that's kind of what I ended up with for my undergrad.
So when you mentioned you were kind of thinking about seminary, so joining the priesthood, has that's been something that's kind of been on the was at least at that time was something that was kind of on the back of your mind?
Yeah, yeah, certainly it was. So, I probably started, honestly, like kind of started thinking about it in middle school. Um, I think at that time in my life, I just had a lot of questions. And one day I remember kind of thinking to myself, well, either all of this is true or it's not. And if it's not true, why am I going to church? And if it is true, it is like really important. So, I started doing kind of a lot of reading, just kind of randomly kind of Googling stuff. And I realized there were, a lot of people out there that had thought about these things at a much deeper level than I ever had.
Sure.
Um, and eventually became just sort of really kind of subjectively kind of convinced about the kind of the truth of Christianity, that it made sense to me. And in high school, really kind of really invested in it, kind of just seeing my own, I guess, just like personal need for a savior that I found in Jesus, and that was a great blessing for me. Um, but yeah, so I started thinking about it a lot in high school. And then when I got to college, I got super involved in the campus ministry there, the Catholic Church St. Mary's on campus,
Yep.
particularly my sophomore through senior year. And that was probably I just did so much there, and it gave me so much life. And I was pretty involved on campus.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I was pretty involved in student government, actually. So
Hmm.
I actually ran for vice president of the student body at Central my senior year.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. So,
I
I mean,
did.
I usually pride myself on doing some good kind of researching and digging, and that's something I did not know.
No, I did. But I remember when I was campaigning for that, because apparently we had to campaign. I was giving a speech, and I remember thinking, you know, for as hard as I've worked in this, for as much as I've worked in kind of all these other campus organizations, nothing gives me life like the stuff I was doing kind of in the campus ministry.
Hmm.
And I realized that I'd much rather be talking to my peers about kind of these more important things. And that was kind of one of the turning points where I was like, okay, I have to really give this a shot and think about this at a deeper level about possibly becoming a priest.
That's super interesting. I mean, you hear some people, talking about like they may get a calling, and you don't know when that might happen. But for you to kind of say, it kind of gradually built over time. Was there any sort of like, okay, this is like, I know this is what I want to do? Was there like one moment that really solidified that for you?
There really wasn't one moment. I think it really was almost more than anything else, kind of this understanding that I'd never really have peace in my life unless I
Sure.
gave it a shot,
Okay.
because it
I,
was just like on my mind so much.
yeah. So, okay. So you make that decision. I'm assuming, do you have to like apply for seminary school, or what goes into that?
Yes, that's a great question. That's it's yes, you do have to apply.
Okay.
And it's kind of a long process. So I entered seminary right out of college. And the first thing you do, so to be a diocesan priest like I am,
Hmm.
the first thing you need to do is find a diocese to sponsor you, which
Sure.
is kind of, a region of the world, basically. And
Right.
that's kind of the diocese you're attached to. So I'm attached to the Diocese of Marquette, Michigan. Um, so they have an application process. You do, interviews. You have to get a physical to make sure you're physically healthy enough. You do a
Sure.
psychological exam. Um, you do all these references. They look at your employment history, your academic history, all that kind of stuff. And then, they decide to accept you. And then you're sent to a seminary that does kind of the rest of your formation, they call it. So education is part of it, but it's only kind of, the classes are only part of it. So you're living in community, you're participating in the prayer life of the community, you're doing kind of these pastoral sorts of outreaches, you're teaching, you're going to hospitals, you're doing these kinds of things. Um, and kind of all along the way you're being evaluated.
Sure.
So particularly in the beginning, um, and you're really kind of asking the question, is God calling me to this? And then kind of the seminary faculty is looking at you and they're saying, okay, is this person a good candidate? Can he live this life?
Sure.
um, and so it's sort of a back and forth process. It's not necessarily adversarial, right? But
Right.
it's a lot of growth and in self-knowledge and kind of the way you sort of relate to people and all that sort of stuff.
That's super interesting to me. Just being completely naive to the process, when I just hear the word seminary, I'm picturing like sitting and studying scripture. And obviously, there's so much more that goes into it from what you're telling me. So, it honestly, it sounds like it's probably a pretty intense experience.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an intense experience. So it's probably it's probably more like joining the military than it is like going to college or going to
Mhm.
graduate school. Um, so the academics definitely take up a lot of time, but you're also doing evaluations and kind of being, talking with people about, how you relate to people, what are strengths, weaknesses, and trying to kind of work through some of those things.
Sure, that makes total sense to me, because I mean, if you just think about it, if you're going to be out there, with the people, you're gonna, when you said that kind of back and forth, that's gonna just be natural, a natural, kind of comes with the territory. So that totally makes sense to me. Now your seminary was down in Detroit, correct?
It was, yep, Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit, Michigan.
Is that a relatively like big school? I mean, how many other people were going through seminary with you?
So that's a good question. So when I was there, I think we had around 120 seminarians who were studying for the priesthood. And then the seminary also had a number of students that weren't studying to be priests, but were studying to get degrees to do other jobs in the church. So I want to say they probably had like another 500 or so commuter students.
Okay. Now, just comparing it to college, let's just say 4 years. How long typically does like seminary take?
So seminary in the United States generally takes 6 to 8 years.
Wow.
So if you have a bachelor's degree going, and it's about a 6 year minimum these days. If you don't have a bachelor's degree going, and it's 8.
Wow.
So yeah, so the first, for me, 2 years were dedicated to philosophy, so doing a lot more study of philosophy, and then the last 4 were pretty heavy theology.
Okay, very interesting. Now, so once you kind of you go through your 6 years, is there like a next step before you become a priest or you're ordained, or like what's next after you complete seminary?
Yep. So that's pretty much it. So along the way, you'll be in the Catholic Church, at least, right? You're ordained a deacon first,
Okay.
and that's when you make kind of the promises of celibacy and some of the other ones, right? Kind
Hmm.
of and then that usually you're a deacon for about a year, and then you're ordained a priest after that. So yeah, it's pretty much. So my graduation from seminary felt pretty anticlimactic. It was like, okay, and then I had the ordination, which was kind of the bigger sort of event.
Sure. So when were you ordained? Like around what time, just to kind of put a time frame on it?
So it was actually May 29th, 2015. So
Okay. Okay.
tomorrow is my 5 year anniversary.
Wow. What I did not plan to be right on your anniversary of that, but that's really great. And I just saw that you posted on your social media that you were just baptized, or your anniversary of your baptism was just really close to that too. So,
Yep.
um, so what went in then to you like being ordained? What's that process like when you said there's more kind of it's a more bigger to do?
Yeah. So I mean, it's in a sense kind of like a wedding, right? It's a big ceremony at the cathedral in Marquette. So the bishop
Hmm.
ordains you. Sort of, kind of the ancient gesture for that is the laying on of hands. So he puts his hands on your head, and says this prayer. And yeah, that's kind of that's your ordination. You're kind of becoming a priest at that moment, and then from there you get to work.
You get to work. So do they like assign you to like a church or a parish, or like I guess what goes into that process as far as where you end up getting, they send you somewhere essentially, correct?
Yep, absolutely. So
Okay.
um, the bishop pretty much has kind of the freedom to assign us wherever he wants. Um, you know, Now every year I get a questionnaire that says, are you happy in your assignment? Would you like a transfer? What kind of a parish would you be interested in? Those kinds of things. So it is a conversation. They don't just usually randomly move you. And it often just depends on kind of where there's a need.
Sure.
Usually these days you start off as an associate pastor or an assistant priest, so you're not maybe in charge of all of the administration. You're not necessarily hiring staff members doing their evaluations, those kinds of things, but you're still preaching, saying mass, hearing confessions, kind of doing the whole thing. So I spent the first 3 years of my priesthood in Menominee,
Oh,
Michigan.
okay. So not too far from home.
No, no, it was a little bit of a hard psychological leap for me to be a maroon in South Dakota.
That's great. I was not expecting you to say that.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, the old rivalries certainly run deep.
Yeah. No, I'd go
Um,
to Menominee high school sporting events, and I'd see my parishioners playing in the games, and you want them to do well, but it's Menominee.
I can imagine. So, how did the opportunity come about for you to be able to study in Rome?
So one day, the bishop said, "Father Brad, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Yes." And I thought, you know, what did I do? Am I in trouble? And he said, he, he just said, I'd like to send you to go on to get a doctorate in theology. He said, I know you like school. I know you've kind of done that, for a while, and I'd like you to get this extra education. Is that something you're willing to do? I said, yeah, Bishop, I like school. If you think it would be helpful for the church up here to have a priest with a little bit more training, I'm happy to do it. And he said, I think it'll be a good plan. He said, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to have you do with it, but I think it'll be a good thing for the future. So we looked at programs, and that kind of Rome seemed to be about as good as any place to kind of do this.
So you basically picked kind of the program you wanted to do, and they send you like so you're right in the Vatican essentially. I mean, so I guess what was the program about?
Yep. So I'm studying a particular kind of branch of theology called moral theology. So it's all about kind of the moral life. It's about human action.
Sure.
I would say it's about human flourishing kind of in the deepest sense. But, so there are different programs kind of all over the world. A lot of priests study in Rome. The system over there is a little bit faster than it is in the United States. So if I were to do this program in the US, it would be really hard to do it in under 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But there it's, I think, very doable.
Okay.
So that's kind of one. And then also the experience of language and culture and kind of getting a more global perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
I'm
I
in
know. Sorry, go ahead.
so I'm in classes with people from, China, India, Sri Lanka, Africa, Spain, Latin America.
Wow. So have you I mean, obviously I know you're very fluent in Spanish, so you probably have been able to show that off a little bit. Have you picked up any Italian or any other like languages or anything?
Yeah, my Spanish has like been destroyed by Italian. Because they're so similar. But yeah, my Italian is passable. It's
Okay.
not excellent, but my courses are all in Italian, so I have to be able to understand it and
Yeah.
speak it at least
Do you have
at a
to write in Italian too, or are you able to just write in English?
thankfully most of the professors read English.
Okay.
So like for the big thesis and stuff, I can write it in English.
Sure. So this past December, you had the incredible honor of being able to meet Pope Francis. Can you tell me how this all came about?
Sure, yeah. So that was so every like 5 years or so, every bishop in the world has to go to Rome to render an account of his ministry to the Pope. And so it was the United States' turn this year. And so when our bishop was over there, they had like the bishops of Michigan and Ohio met with the Pope together for about 2 hours one day. And I was able to, because I was over there, our bishop took me in with him. So I was only able to basically, I basically just shook the Pope's hand, and then he
Sure.
like talked to all the priests that had to leave and said, it's good that you're here. It's good to see you. He's like, now you have to wait until the bishops are done with their meeting. And then he sent us away.
Well, and I'm sure he's got a pretty like rigid, strict schedule that he's got to keep to, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he met with them for like 2 hours and they talked about all kinds of stuff. But yeah, it was great that I was able to at least go and, say hello and shake his hand.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that's an incredible honor. I mean, does he have like a lot of security around him? Or, I mean, I'm curious to, obviously, because I'm super naive to the situation, but.
Yeah, security in Italy, I don't necessarily always understand it. Some of the stuff is like really strict and then other stuff isn't. So for this, and I think we were just bussed over there. So I got on a bus with the bishops, and then the buses just drove right into the Vatican.
Sure.
So they drove right into Vatican City. We got out and then we just got in the elevator and went and met him, we didn't have any real security to go through.
Wow. I guess if there's any people that you assume are trustworthy, you and your group that you were with are probably pretty high on that list.
Well, I think under other circumstances they do make you go through security, but I think they just assumed since it was an official visit, they weren't going to make us go through metal detectors and stuff.
Sure, sure. With your studies, do you get to go into Vatican City quite often, or is it mostly just kind of centered in Rome?
Yeah, so it's mostly Rome.
Okay.
Every time I go to the Vatican, I feel like psychologically brace myself for it because there are just so many tourists.
Sure.
um, it's a little bit of a process. So, the Vatican really is St. Peter's Basilica, right?
Right.
Um, the or like a couple other things that you can go see, but by and large, I don't have a ton of business there. So,
Sure.
um, unless I'm going to St. Peter's, I don't usually get over there too much.
Has it been an adjustment, like living in Rome, like that big of a city compared to obviously like Menominee?
Yeah, so yes, that was an adjustment, just dealing with crowds. And I live in central Rome, which is great, but it's, you're just always kind of fighting through tourists and all those kinds of things to get from point A to point B.
Sure. I'm assuming besides just obviously your studies, you're kind of obviously able to get out and explore a bit. What have been some of your like enjoyable experiences that you've had while you've been there? Besides obviously, the ones we've already talked about.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel really blessed to be over there. One of the things that I get to do that I love is I'm a part-time chaplain for an American Study Abroad program.
Oh,
So
okay.
University of Marion, Bismarck, North Dakota, I help out with their own program. So I do chaplaincy work with them once or twice a week. Um, so it's been good. But around Rome, I get to see, the Colosseum, is down the street. Um, the Circus Maximus isn't too far. I walk around there quite a bit. Um, you've had a couple opportunities to travel in Europe, a little bit because it's everything's so close. So
Yeah.
uh, went to Slovenia once for a
Okay.
weekend. Um, in Sweden once for a weekend. Um, just to see some different places.
So you grew up here surrounded by Italian food. How does it compare to the motherland?
It's interesting. So I had a grandma my great grandmother was, I think, mostly Austrian and German, but she grew up on the north side of Iron Mountain. So
Yep.
she always would make us like this Italian food. And like occasionally I'll eat something somewhere. I'll be like, this tastes like my grandmother's spaghetti sauce. Like, like I'll think that to myself. I would say the food over there is different than the Italian food in Iron Mountain,
Right.
in a lot of ways, but occasionally there'll be like a flavor that just kind of reminds me of something from my great grandma.
I, I can imagine. I just think that that's funny. But so while you're over there, because you were just there up until recently. Obviously, this whole coronavirus pandemic hits. Um, so you're still kind of like over there in the middle of classes. I mean, uh, what was it like dealing with that? Was it I mean, did they come up with a plan to get you back home, or I guess what happened when everything started occurring?
Yes, that was an adventure. Yeah, because stuff in Italy sort of blew up before it did in the United States.
Right.
So, I want to say our stay-at-home order was early March, like maybe March 4th. And we didn't really have, any clue what this was. It was like there was a new decree from the prime minister every day, just kind of gradually shutting more and more stuff down. And so a lot of guys left early. I was going to stick it out, and the place where I'm staying is a house of about 75 priests, kind of like a big dorm, mostly Americans. And they said, we were planning on staying open. And then as more and more stuff closed, they said, okay, we need to close down. You all have to leave. Um, so I was there for like 3 weeks of the lockdown order in Italy. And yeah, then we just had to fly home and then do the 2 week quarantine. And I think the day I arrived in Michigan was the day Michigan's stay-at-home order started.
Wow. Was it tough actually like getting back into the United States and getting home, or was it pretty smooth?
No, at that time there was still one flight from Rome to New York
Okay.
um, that we took, and then they took your temperature on the jet bridge, and then gave you a little card and took your information.
Okay.
Um, so I quarantined with a friend downstate actually.
Yeah, that
Uh,
was going to be my next question is where did you do this 14-day quarantine?
yeah, so I have a friend of mine who's a priest down in the Lansing area, and he had a place where we could stay. So we spent 2 weeks there. But while we were there, a public health nurse called us and wanted us to check in every day to make sure that neither of us developed symptoms and
Sure.
um, all of that. So I spent 2 weeks there and then flew from Detroit to Iron Mountain. There was one other person on the plane.
Wow.
So,
So
so
you
yeah,
you were able to properly social distance.
we were there. That was no problem.
So I guess what else have you been doing then during the quarantine to kind of like pass the time here?
Yeah, so I'm still in school.
Oh, okay.
So
So you're still actively doing like virtual learning.
yeah, so our semester, our school year is a little bit shifted from the year in the United States. So my semester goes till mid-June. So yep, I'm still doing that, and a lot of my work right now is research and writing. So
Okay.
that's just my life and is going to be ongoing through the summer. So I'm
Sure.
living in Marquette and helping helping out in parishes on the weekends. But other than that, just working on school.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say. I know when we were talking in trying to set this up, you had mentioned that you were possibly going to be teaching some classes up in Houghton too.
Yeah, so this is just kind of a side project. There's a group
Oh,
of
okay.
yeah, so there's a group of college students that are going to do some work this summer. I'm just going to give like 12 hours of lessons to them. So nothing super
Gotcha.
official, but just some other kind of priestly help out stuff.
Sure. So is the game plan to eventually head back to Rome at some point? I mean, once things clear up.
Yep, so I have 2 more years on my kind of left in this program. So I have a ticket for September 17th. Hopefully that flight still exists in September, but plan on going back and giving it another try.
Sure. You mentioned you've been helping out a little bit around, local parishes or just doing some things here and there within the diocese. It's my understanding they're starting to kind of open some churches back up, correct?
Yep. Yeah. So we opened churches, I think last weekend or the weekend before. I think last weekend was the first weekend we were
Yeah,
open. Yeah. So actually, I haven't been doing too much of that yet because we've been locked down. But that should pick up kind of into the rest of the summer.
yeah. I had gotten a letter from Father Mike, and for those listening in, Brad and I have the same home parish.
We do.
So,
Yep.
so I got a letter from Father Mike, and I wasn't sure if uh, all churches were going to kind of follow the same suit, or if some are just kind of going with what works for them, or how that whole plan was laid out. So,
Yeah. Yeah. For us for the Catholic churches in the UP, the bishop said we could open
mhm.
last weekend, but it kind of depended on your local resources and setup. Like each pastor kind of had to look at their church and see what would work to kind of keep people distanced and all that kind of stuff.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I know the bishop granted a dispensation to everybody, and I definitely want to get back. It's going to be strange, I know, with the rules. I kind of feel like I have to kind of get over the fear and just go. But
Mhm.
and it'll definitely be interesting with the spacing rules and everything. Have you seen any of that or experienced any of that yet at all, or no?
Yeah, I've helped out a little bit here in Marquette, and yeah, it's just weird because everyone's spaced out, and when we distribute communion, we have to wear a mask and those kinds of things. And even just thinking as a priest, like, okay, when do I need to wash my hands or use hand sanitizer, those kinds of things to kind of limit the possible spread of disease. So you're just kind of thinking about, how to make that work well.
Sure, sure. Um, I want to talk to you a little bit about just kind of at least your experiences as a priest thus far. Because obviously, you're a younger priest, and I think the majority of people, if you had tell them to close their eyes and you say picture a priest, they're probably thinking an older man, maybe with a beard or glasses, that type of thing. What's your experience been like as being one of the younger priests out there?
Yeah, it's funny. That is something that people say a lot. Sometimes when people say, "Oh, you're so young, Father," I want to say, "Well, you're so old," but didn't think that would go very well.
Probably not.
Said but no, it is a good. It's great. I love being a priest. I feel like I just get to do so many different things and be with people in so many kind of different like significant moments in their lives. I really do love it. Being in school is kind of rough right now because I don't get to do a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do when I became a priest. But it has just been a good life. And I think as a younger priest, I do find especially talking to people our age and stuff, I think sometimes, and even a little bit younger, I've just appreciated having someone a little bit more, I think, in their demographic to
Sure.
kind of talk to sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. The naysayers of the world out there, would say a lot of stuff is outdated or old fashioned. So, having a younger face and being able to maybe put a younger point of view or a spin on it, I think would certainly help appeal to a younger generation. Are there any other kind of things that our diocese or maybe the Catholic Church are doing to kind of continue to appeal to a younger audience?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that just kind of depends on where you are,
Sure.
right? UP is a big place. So, um, and I do think like for a lot of young adults, especially, you get out of college, you move to some place and have a job, and then all of a sudden it becomes like kind of hard to meet new people. I think it's a pretty common experience with, a lot of people in their mid to late 20s and early
Big time,
30s
for
that,
sure. Yeah.
it's a big thing. And, there are, in my experience, right, there are people like in church, for example, there are people in our age demographic very often that are there, but sometimes those connections just aren't made, and people just don't like introduce themselves even, or those kinds of things. And, I think as society does become a little bit more fragmented and these kinds of things, there really are a lot of opportunities for connection that, can kind of come up in those contexts. And I know when I was in the parish, I used to try to work hard at like looking at young adults that were there and say, "Oh, you should meet this person," and just kind of foster that. And I think that's been, um, you know, re- uh, good and important, and something we should probably do more of.
Yeah, I think that's really great. As as somebody that's a pretty devout follower, I don't miss mass very often. Um, I routinely have found myself looking around, and a lot of times I'm the youngest person there by quite a few years, except for maybe one or two other people. And like you said, you don't get that connection of going over and maybe saying hi to somebody or getting to know somebody, where if you establish those connections, it certainly would probably help foster that a little bit better. So I can really relate to what you're saying. um, the other thing I keep thinking of, as well as we're kind of talking about this topic, is youth encounter
Oh, sure.
growing up in the UP. That played a really big role in developing my faith and continuing my faith into my I won't say my later adult years, because I'm not that old. I don't want to date myself too much, but going to Mary Grove, the retreat center, was just like I said, it played a really big role for me. So I just keep thinking of things like that as well. Um, are they still doing Youth Encounter even though Mary Grove has unfortunately closed?
Yeah, they are in fact still doing Youth Encounter, and yeah, that was a big part of my life. I was very involved in that. Had a great experience in that, and yeah, that's I think going strong. I think they did the last one at Fortune Lake
Oh, okay.
um, camp. So they did it up there. I think just before the state locked down with the coronavirus stuff. But yeah, that's they found a way to kind of repurpose it and do it somewhere else, and I think it's going really well. They have a website now,
Oh, okay.
youthencounter906.org or something,
Okay.
um, something like that. But yeah, no, it's going well.
Didn't another website recently launch, like Upper Catholic or something along those lines?
It did, and I wish I could tell you more about it. But yeah, I think it is kind of another diocesan sort of outreach to people. I think one of the things, especially in the pandemic, that we've noticed is that having some kind of online presence and way of communicating with people is very important.
Yes.
Not every pair was maybe quite as set up for that as others were. Um, so I'm guessing this has kind of been in the works for a while, but I think it's just another opportunity to share media, share content, and add some more kind of local flavor to some of the really good Catholic content that's out there on the internet. There's a lot of really good things being produced on YouTube and other things that sometimes I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just helps bridge that gap. I mean, you talked a little bit earlier about how big the UP is. I mean, we're spread out all over the place, and to get to all those far reaches across the UP isn't always exactly an easy thing. So to kind of have, you know, one spot where you can really kind of do that for, people following their faith and, living their faith, I think that that's really great. Um, Speaking of that, I would imagine that as you've kind of traveled around the UP to different places with, doing things for the diocese, it's got to be kind of an interesting way to kind of see the UP
It
that probably
is.
most people don't get to experience.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. Um, like I think last summer I had mass in Ewan, I had mass in Bergland, Ontonagon, um, Rockland, and that's actually one priest actually takes care of all of those churches right now.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
I know it's a huge area, but yeah, no, very different communities, interesting little, small churches. Houghton, you have the campus parish, Houghton Castle. I was up there in the
Have you ever
Sioux.
been able to do the ice mass?
I've never done the ice mass. No.
I want to go. Every year I keep saying I'm going to go up for it, and I haven't yet, but that's definitely on my bucket list. I want to check off.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to deal with the cold.
You were saying you went over to the Sioux as well?
Yep, I was in the Sioux last summer.
Okay. So you're really kind of hitting just about all ends pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, just as they need me. That's my that's my current summer help out schedule.
Perfect. Well, Brad, we've pretty much kind of hit all of the boxes that I kind of had that I wanted to really kind of chat with you about. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or anything like that?
The only thing I'd say, Scott, is I think I discovered your podcast last year at some point, and I'd say I was probably had been in Italy for like 4 or 5 months at that point, and was just kind of like really missing the UP. And I think I saw you interviewed Brandon Urkla, and I
Yep.
was like, Scott Reddick is interviewing Brandon Urkla. I need to listen to this. And as you guys were talking about like, um, playing as kids in the Heights, it really
Yes.
like made me like helped with my homesickness. I was like, oh,
That
good,
I'm
good taste of home right there. So I really
good.
would appreciate it.
How thick did the accent sound?
It did actually sound pretty thick to me at that point.
Uh, my fiance Patty, bless her heart, she's from originally down near Detroit, and even though she's lived up in the UP for quite some time, she's still all the time she's like, "You have such an accent," and I don't hear it obviously, but so she kind of will poke fun at my accent every now and then when my Uper slang gets real thick. So
Mhm. Yeah, I don't. When I'm living here, I don't usually hear it, but when I've been living somewhere else for a while, it comes out a little bit stronger when I'm talking to like my parents or other people sometimes.
did any of the priests in Rome say that you had an accent?
Just certain words, um, like whenever I say beg, they
Oh, okay.
have me funny for that.
Oh, that's really funny. Dude, I know you mentioned, some of them are from all over the world. Do they know like where the UP is or what the UP is when you like tell them where you're from?
Oh man, there was a guy from New York last year that I made read the Wikipedia article about the Upper Peninsula. Because he asked me one day, because our diocese is the whole UP, right? And he said, "So Brad, does your diocese border the United States?" And I said, "Yes, and it is part of the United States, in fact."
Wow.
So yeah, we got some things, but I've been a good I've educated many people about the Upper Peninsula of Michigan since being over there.
That's very, very cool. So I guess I'll just kind of end things here with the question that I ask everybody, and you've listened to the podcast, you know the question. So how do you like your pasty?
I like my pasty plain.
Plain? No, no, nothing.
Well, so I usually add a lot of salt.
Okay.
I love salt on pasties. Like they never have enough on it for me, so I always do that. But I'm not a big ketchup guy.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I mean, you probably were getting bad cravings over there when you're missing home. I mean, they're not readily available, I'm guessing.
No, they are not readily available. So
Although I've had this discussion before where a calzone is just basically an Italian pasty. So
it's yeah, they're different.
yeah, they are,
But yes, it is basically an Italian pasty.
well, Father Brad, I thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and chat with me. This has been a lot of fun catching up with you because I haven't talked to you in quite some time, probably since the last time you said mass at St. Mary's. So this was like I said, it was really great catching up. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great talking to you.